Boy, if you watched chapter 36, you're probably just like hanging on, like, oh, what's happening next? What's happening next? That's like the cliffhanger spot to end chapter 36 on. So let's jump over to today. We're going to be talking about 37, Isaiah 37. Uh, Rabshakeh, the representative of Assyria, has laid his argument out to Judah. Here's why you need to surrender and give yourself up. So 37, today we're going to talk about Hezekiah's response, basically. So verse 1, it came to pass when King Hezekiah heard it, that he rent his clothes and covered himself with sackcloth and went into the house of the Lord. So remember, renting your clothes is a sign of protest against things, or you're witnessing against what you've just heard. And then covering yourself with sackcloth is basically putting on clothes made from burlap, basically like the stuff they package potatoes in, those kind of cloth bags. It's kind of like that. It's really itchy and scratchy. It's meant to help you feel suffering and have humility in your suffering. So now he's going to the house of the Lord, which is the temple. Okay. And verse 2, and he sent Eliakim, who was over the household, and Shebna the scribe, and the elders of the priests covered with sackcloth, unto Isaiah the prophet, the son of Amoz. So Hezekiah is going to talk to God directly and go to the temple to commune with God. He sent these other guys in sackcloth as well to go to the prophet Isaiah to get wisdom and advice from him. Verse 3, they said unto him, thus saith Hezekiah, this is a day of trouble and of rebuke, and of blasphemy, for the children are come to the birth, and there is not strength to bring forth. Now that's kind of an interesting idea to think about, this concept of the children are come to the birth, there is not strength to bring forth. So that's kind of this metaphor, the idea of the baby is ready to be born, but we don't have strength. The mom doesn't have strength to help that baby come out, basically. It really means that we are dealing with a crisis and we don't believe we can win. We don't believe we can be successful at accomplishing what we need to do. So verse 4, it may be the Lord thy God will hear the words of Rabshakeh, whom the king of Assyria his master has sent to approach the living God, and will reprove the words which the Lord thy God hath heard. Wherefore lift up thy prayer for the remnant that is left. So the servants of King Hezekiah came to Isaiah. So this is them pleading, going, we want to understand, what does God think about what Rabshakeh said? Should we heed him, or what's going on? So verse 6 is now Isaiah's response. And Isaiah said unto them, thus shall ye say unto your master, which is Hezekiah the king, thus saith the Lord, be not afraid of the words that thou hast heard, wherewith the servants of the king of Assyria have blasphemed me. Behold, I will send a blast upon him, and he shall hear a rumor, and return to his own land. And I will cause him to fall by the sword in his own land. So this is actually a prophecy of Sennacherib. He's saying, I will send out a blast. Sennacherib is going to hear a message of something, hear a rumor. He's going to leave. And as he leaves to go back to deal with something else, he's going to be killed. So he's going to be out of the way here pretty soon. Verse 8, so Rabshakeh returned and found the king of Assyria warring against Libnah, for he had heard that he was departed from Lachish. So Rabshakeh returns to Lachish, thinking that Sennacherib is over there, still dealing, because that's where he was when he left Lachish to go to Jerusalem, still battling and dealing with everything there. He gets back to Lachish and realizes, oh, Sennacherib has left. He is gone. So now we're kind of getting this telling of the story as these people are dealing with Isaiah. We're hearing kind of, and here's the part that's the timeline of what's happening. And so he's gone, basically. And so he says, verse 9, and he heard saying concerning Tirhaka, the king of Ethiopia, he is come forth to make war with thee. And when he heard it, he sent messengers to Hezekiah, saying, Thus shall ye speak to Hezekiah, king of Judah, saying, Let not thy God in whom thou trustest deceive thee, saying, Jerusalem shall not be given into the hand of the king of Assyria. Behold, thou hast heard what the kings of Assyria have done to all lands by destroying them utterly, and shalt thou be delivered? Have the gods of the nations delivered them, which my fathers have destroyed, as Gozan and Haran and Rezeph, and the children of Eden which were in Telassar? Where is the king of Hamath, and the king of Arphad, and the king of the cities of Sepharvaim, Hena and Iva? So again, this is the same message that Rabshakeh told to Judah, to the people in Jerusalem, and to send the message to Hezekiah. And so Sennacherib is saying, oh, we got to go down to Ethiopia. Ethiopia is preparing to fight us now. So Jerusalem is kind of in the way to get down over there. So we're just going to march past you. Don't think for a second that you stand a chance. Nobody else has stood a chance. The history proves we have been right. We're going to continue to assume we're right to move forward. Just because history shows one thing doesn't mean it's completely going to happen in the future, especially when you put God into the mix of things. So verse 14, Hezekiah received the letter from the hand of the messengers and read it. And Hezekiah went up unto the house of the Lord and spread it before the Lord. And Hezekiah prayed unto the Lord, saying, O Lord of hosts, excuse me, God of Israel, that dwellest between the cherubims, thou art the God. That's a cool thing. Thou art the God. If you remember, there used to be that man. You the man, thou art the God, kind of an idea. Even thou alone, of all the kingdoms of the earth, thou hast made heaven and earth. Incline thine ear, O Lord, and hear. Open thine eyes, O Lord, and see. And hear all the words of Sennacherib, which hath sent to reproach the living God. So this is Hezekiah laying it all out before God, going, God, he's still not listening. He's still coming. He didn't take heed to threat that, that, oh no, we're not going to worry about him. He's still coming. So verse 18, of a truth, Lord, the kings of Assyria have laid waste all the nations in their country. So he's saying they are correct that they have been very victorious and no other God has been able to stop them. Verse 19, they have cast their gods into the fire, for they were no gods, but the work of men's hands, wood and stone, therefore they have destroyed them. Now therefore, O Lord our God, save us from his hand, that all the kingdoms of the earth may know that thou art the Lord, even thou only. So this is important. This is getting to this perspective of what's going on. Remember, Assyria is coming from the perspective of, we have a God and he gave us the edict to come destroy you guys and take you over. And all the other nations have had gods as well. None of them have helped us. Why is that? Because they were all fake gods. This is what Abraham was talking about, and a lot of other ancient prophets saying that you worship idols. They can't do anything of their own. It's fake. It's a fraud. Except Israel, and so now we go to Hezekiah's, from Sennacherib's perspective, Israel's God is just another God, like everybody else. From Hezekiah's perspective, he says, you, God, are actually the God. The difference from the other gods is they were fake. You're the real God. Please help us. Make a difference. Make sure our future doesn't become the same as all these other countries that Assyria has dealt with. And so Sennacherib doesn't realize, he just sees this blank, oh yeah, whatever, you have a God, yay, you're monotheistic instead of polytheistic. That's weird, but whatever. It's still not going to work, okay? This is a great important point for us to think about, is sometimes we get stuck with a wrong perspective. Changing our perspective can make such a difference, okay? This is why we have to be willing to understand that we might not know the answer to everything. Our thinking might not be completely correct, and somebody else's thinking might be correct. The only way Sennacherib would know if his opinion and his perspective was correct was to ask himself the question, what if Hezekiah is right? What if their God is the God and isn't one of these fake gods like everybody else has had. If he thought that, he may be more hesitant and concerned about going into and fighting Jerusalem. But he didn't. He maintained his own perspective. Now, we as humans have a tendency of doing this. We take our own perspective and we fight for it. We learn something, and then we spend the rest of our life defending the thing we learned, rather than saying, maybe my perspective's not the right one. Maybe I'm not completely correct. I have some truth, but I have some faults. You have to be willing, in order for you to learn and understand truth, you have to be willing to admit that you might not know all the truth. There might be something out there you're missing. So you need to be willing to take other perspectives. That's important. So Hezekiah knows there's a different perspective here. He knows Sennacherib is not using the right perspective. And he knows that's going to be the difference maker in this. And Sennacherib doesn't see the difference because of his perspective. So realize as we look at this that we take the time to understand our perspective. Do we have the right perspective of the issue or challenge we're facing? Oftentimes we get stuck in the problems we have because we do not have the right perspective. So when you're in an argument with somebody, realize they have a different perspective. It's important to understand their perspective. By understanding their perspective, you might look at this and go, oh, I see it from my side, I see it from their side. Now I understand what's going on here. I might be a little wrong, they might be a little wrong, but now we can figure this out. Until you're willing to look at each other's perspectives, it's hard to get an argument to resolve. So this is a very valuable lesson that we can look at today, is never take one perspective. Seek the truth, not a perspective. Look for different people's opinions and ideas. This is super, super important. Okay, never underestimate or devalue somebody else's experience. Look at it. How can this inform the greater understanding of what we need to do? That is how you find truth. That is how you find what's right. Use those tools. Use those things. Okay, this could have been a whole different outcome if Sennacherib had done that. But he didn't. He followed the normal traditional human way, which is to believe my perspective is the right one and to impose that on others. As parents, we often do this with our kids. We impose our perspective on them. And when they're little, that's okay. You can get away with that. But as they get older, that doesn't fly. They have a perspective, and you have to honor their perspective and work with them to understand each other better, basically. So that's the challenge that's happening here. So, all right, so that's kind of the little soapbox for a second there. Let's get back into Isaiah. So this is what Hezekiah has put out there to God, basically. So in verse 21, Isaiah is now going to come to Hezekiah and deliver a message. So verse 21, then Isaiah the son of Amoz sent unto Hezekiah, saying, Thus saith the Lord God of Israel, whereas thou hast prayed to me against Sennacherib, king of Assyria. This is the word which the Lord has spoken concerning him. So this is a revelation to Sennacherib, basically, or concerning Sennacherib. He says here, the virgin, the daughter of Zion, hath despised thee, and laughed thee to scorn. The daughter of Jerusalem hath shaken her head at thee. Whom hast thou reproached and blasphemed? And against whom hast thou exalted thy voice, and lifted up thine eyes on high? Even against the Holy One of Israel. So what God is saying in these verses really quick is basically, so the daughter of Zion, the virgin, this is talking about the people. Sennacherib believes the people are despising him because they're not complying. By not complying, they are kind of despising him. This is kind of the idea in Sennacherib's mind. He's probably envisioning if Sennacherib had seen Monty Python and the Search for the Holy Grail, Sennacherib's mind's probably equating the Frenchman to how Jerusalem is treating him. They're going, we don't need you. We're fine. We're going to belittle you. Ha ha ha. You can't do anything against us. And that's where Sennacherib's perspective is. And so that's what God is talking about here, because then he goes in verse 23, who has Sennacherib blasphemed? Who has Sennacherib argued with? And he says, it wasn't Jerusalem he argued with, it was me, God. He has threatened me, saying, I can't help save my people, basically. Verse 24, by thy servants hast thou reproached the Lord, and hast said, by the multitude of my chariots am I come up to the height of the mountains, to the sides of Lebanon, and I will cut down the tall cedars thereof, and the choice fir trees thereof, and I will enter into the height of his border, and the forest of his Carmel. So this is, again, talking about how Sennacherib is going to siege Israel. Verse 25, I have digged and drunk water, and with the sole of my feet I dried up all the rivers of the besieged places. So verse 26, thou hast not heard long ago how I have done it, and of ancient times that I have formed it. Now have I brought it to pass, that thou shouldest be to lay waste defenced cities into ruinous heaps. Therefore their inhabitants were of small power, they were dismayed and confounded, they were as the grass of the field, and as the green herb, as the grass on the housetops, and as corn blasted before it be grown up. But I know thy abode, and thy going out and thy coming in, and thy rage against me. So God is really laying this out there to Sennacherib, going, I know who you are. I understand that because of your might, the military might, the power you've pulled together, you have been able to destroy a lot of other nations and have been able to be really successful at it. But I know you, and I know who you are. And he says in verse 29, because thy rage against me and thy tumult is come up into mine ears, therefore will I put my hook in thy nose, and my bridle in thy lips, and I will turn thee back by the way by which thou camest. That's powerful. Yes, you have been powerful, Sennacherib. Yes, you've been able to do some amazing things, but you will not despise me, the real God. I will turn you around and control you and manipulate you, basically. So that's the bridle, you put it on for like a horse, so you can ride the horse, and when you pull on it, it moves the head of the horse so they turn. That's what he's talking about. I'm going to turn your head away from my people. Verse 30, this shall be a sign unto thee, ye shall eat this year such as groweth of itself, and the second year that which springeth of the same, and in the third year sow ye and reap, and plant vineyards and eat the fruit thereof. So this is the sign unto thee, meaning Hezekiah, okay? So verse 30 and these next few verses is to King Hezekiah. So he's telling him, don't worry, plant your crops. You'll be there to harvest them for 3 years. In fact, this can mean that Judah will remain since the northern kingdoms have been taken captive by Assyria. This year might be tough, next year might be tough, but it will get prosperous again. This can also be prophetic of Assyria, that of Assyria will not fully destroy you, and Babylon won't either. But a remnant will God spare, and they will return. Things will get much better when they return. So we can see this literally this is that duality idea that we've talked a lot about in Isaiah. Literally, we could see this as, hey, Hezekiah, don't worry. It's going to be fine. You can plant your crops. You'll be here for the harvest. For several years, you will be able to plant your crops and harvest just fine. You'll be abundant. You don't need to worry about Assyria. We could see this spiritually and realize that you'll survive the Assyrian onslaught. You'll survive the Babylonian onslaught. Barely, but a little will survive, and then that little will turn into a remnant, which will then come and be prosperous in the last days. So we could spiritually see this as a greater concept of things, basically. It's interesting that a lot of things that have happened in the Old Testament are somewhat metaphorical of things that will be spiritually happening in the last days. So as you read the Old Testament and you see literally things happening, think of, what does this mean spiritually? And it probably applies to the last days. It's really fascinating how the Old Testament does that. It's really neat. So verse 31, and the remnant that is escaped of the house of Judah shall again take root downward and bear fruit upward. For out of Jerusalem shall go forth a remnant, and they that escape out of Mount Zion. The zeal of the Lord of hosts shall do this. So again, we can see where there's that duality of prophecy in here. Literally, Judah will be fine for now, for a little while, but spiritually, you'll survive the calamities and challenges, and eventually a remnant will return in the last days, and it will be an amazing opportunity. Verse 33, therefore, thus saith the Lord concerning the king of Assyria. So this is turning back to Sennacherib. He shall not come into this city, nor shoot an arrow there, nor come before it with shields, nor cast a bank against it. By the way that he came, by the same shall he return, and shall not come into this city, saith the Lord. That's pretty powerful stuff right there. For I will defend this city to save it for mine own sake and for my servant David's sake. That's verse 35. So he is going to preserve. You remember, he made promises to David about preserving a remnant where the Savior will come through his line. And so we can't allow Jerusalem to be utterly destroyed, and Jerusalem needs to be there for the last days to be rebuilt and a place of gathering for the Jews once again. So because these old prophecies and old promises are in place, I am going to spare Jerusalem. That's what he's really getting at here. Now, verse 36, so this is putting things into practice. So remember, the Assyrian army is there. Sennacherib's come down this time because it's time to deal with these people. Verse 36, then the angel of the Lord went forth and smote in the camp of the Assyrians 185,000. And when they arose early in the morning, behold, they were all dead corpses. I think that's 185,000 is like 145,000, I think is what that means. Can you imagine being in the Assyrian army? Oh yeah, we got this big army. We're surrounding Jerusalem. This is just day-to-day stuff for these guys. They've done this to so many kingdoms over the years that it's just normal. We're going to surround them. We're going to lay siege. They're going to try to fight. They're going to get weak and tired, and we're just going to walk all over the top of them, and it's going to be done. Just another day at the office for a soldier. Then they go to bed that night, and they get up the next day and find 145,000 soldiers dead from an unknown cause. There's no wounds. There's no stab wounds. There's no arrows or knives in them. They're just dead overnight. How crazy is that? You got to be a little worried about, oh, there's a curse. There's something going on here. I don't know if we want to be in Jerusalem anymore. That's not a good thing. So in verse 37, so Sennacherib, king of Assyria, departed and went and returned and dwelt at Nineveh. And Nineveh is the main capital of Assyria. It's kind of north from Jerusalem, way up a little ways. Before you get into like Turkey and that area up there, but it's up a ways, and then that's their main capital of Assyria. So after Sennacherib looked at this and went, what the heck? Okay, I'm sure he's like, maybe their God is a legit God. Let's not mess with Judah right now. Let's go back and regroup. So they left and did exactly what God said. He went back the way he came. Verse 38, and it came to pass that as he was worshiping in the house of Nisroch, his god, that Adramelech and Sharezer, his sons, smote him with the sword, and they escaped into the land of Armenia. And Esarhaddon, his son, reigned in his stead. So Sennacherib has been assassinated by his sons. He's out of the picture now. And Esarhaddon, his other son, has come in. Could it be a coup? I think it was a coup that happened with his sons to take over the kingdom from their dad, basically. But the will of God was done. The prophecies were fulfilled. So now Jerusalem has some peace, some opportunities, because Assyria is not coming down at this time for them. So let's jump over to the next chapters. We continue to understand the story of Assyria and Judah.